gentlemen, the occasion, of course, is the naming of the first Apollo flight crew. Now, the crewmen will be Lieutenant Colonel Virgil Gus Grissom, Lieutenant Colonel Edward H. White, and Lieutenant Roger B. Chaffee. Now, the backups, or the backup crew, would be Lieutenant Colonel James McDivitt, Major David Scott, who is at the center right now but is not able to be here, and Mr. Russell L. Schweikert of NASA. The far end of the table, as you may have guessed by now, is Joe Shea, the manager of the Apollo program. I think it would be appropriate at this time maybe to ask Gus for a few words.
Well, I didn't know I was going to have to say anything today. I'm real pleased to be on the first flight and looking forward to it. I've just now started getting into the Apollo systems and looking at Apollo spacecraft and trying to forget everything I knew about Gemini. I think we've got a real good crew with Ed and Roger, and then with Jim and Rusty and Dave Scott backing us up. Well, I think we've got a good crew. We'll have a good flight.
No, I'm quite pleased to be named on the first Apollo flight. As you might know, when we came in here, we were assigned and worked primarily in the Apollo area until we were fortunate enough to get, till I was fortunate enough to get pulled off and get to fly Gemini. And it's nice to be back in working in Apollo. We are working in the systems right now, getting up to speed, and I think we'll all be looking forward to the flight.
I've been working in the Apollo system since I joined NASA about 2 years ago, and needless to say, I'm extremely excited about being named to this flight crew, and I think I've got a couple of the greatest men in the world to work with. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Kind of a pleasure to finally get some men in the manned space part of Apollo. This unmanned part of the program has been going on a little bit too long. I got one minor bone to pick with Gus. Since Apollo is derived very heavily from Mercury and Gemini, and we rely extremely much on that experience, I don't really want him to forget what he's learned in Gemini, but rather to bring it with him, and I suspect that's really what he's going to do.
I want to forget the bad things.
You keep telling me there weren't any. Well, I think it's a great crew. I think that Gus has shown he's a good commander, and I look forward to the whole Apollo team working with these guys and beginning what I hope will be a long and successful Apollo flight schedule. The mission itself is something a little different for a first manned flight than we've done before. The mission is, there are two missions like this in the Block 1 part of the program. The prime purpose of the mission is to really exercise the spacecraft and the crews in Earth orbit. So you recognize that we will have had only two relatively short flights, the one that we had last month and the upcoming Flight 202 that will be sometime this summer. The first mission, however, rather than restricting it to any arbitrary number of orbits before the mission starts, will be what we would call an open-ended mission. The intent is to make, in effect, a series of decisions for the first 6 orbits, essentially a decision each orbit that the spacecraft is operating properly and is therefore go. I think you're aware after about 6 orbits there's a fairly major commitment then, hopefully for a long period of time. And we would then, after about the first 6 orbits, expect to make go decisions roughly once a day. As far as the experiments are concerned, there'll be primarily medical experiments on the first mission. I think there are some 10 total. Most of these have been done in the Gemini program, and these are repeats of them because this would be, if it went all the way, one of the longer missions that we've run.
Any indication when this flight will take place?
It's presently scheduled for the first quarter of '67, assuming it's on 204.
Which one is the navigator, the senior pilot or the pilot?
I think the reason why we haven't designated any person as the navigator or a systems engineer, as we have somewhat in the past worked along these lines, is that it's really a three-man operation, and there won't be any one person doing the navigation nor any one person doing strictly the systems. They'll have people that will be up for a period of time while one of the crew members will be sleeping. So you can see that you obviously can't have somebody sitting in the commander's seat, the same man, the whole flight. It'll be swapping around, so there'll be a navigator, and he'll be all three men. All three men will be fully qualified navigators, systems engineers.
You're saying that you'll be cross-trained to be able to step into anybody's, or sit into anybody's seat.
That's right. That's the only way you can do it, when you have to realize one man has to be down sleeping for some of the period of time when two men are up, roughly a 6 to 8 hour period.
Will there be any rendezvous practice on this mission?
No rendezvous planned on this one at this time.
Unlike Gemini, therefore, one of the crew members will be awake at all times.
We plan to have one crew member awake all the time.
I realize that this isn't a flight to the moon, but if it were, which two men would go down to the surface of the moon? Which two men you would go into the LEM?
I'm not sure this has been resolved at this time.
I don't think the
If
planning
it was
office.
It was this crew, I would be me and somebody else.
Very good.
Are they all medical experiments, Dr. Shea, or are you having any scientific and engineering type?
Let's see. I guess there are two minor.
There are two scientific experiments on board, photographing weather and the land masses, and I believe there's one other technical one.
The nephelometer.
The nephelometer, that's right.
Oh, that's for the inside the spacecraft. That's right.
The rest of them are medical.
Since Mr. Shea has indicated that he realizes that some problems might occur on an open-ended flight, will the recovery forces be more extensive in the Apollo program than they have been in Gemini?
No, I don't think so. We would plan to use the same recovery areas. My impression is they've worked out pretty well, even in somewhat emergency situations.
Dr. Shea, could you give us a rundown then on the flight plan for that mission? What will be primarily important on the first manned mission, and secondary objectives and things like that?
I'd prefer not to do it in nauseating detail. Basically, the primary things we're doing is literally engineering experimentation on the spacecraft. That's one reason why the number of other experiments are so small. We want to do a number of burns on the service module engine of various degrees, see how it operates after it's been soaked in space, reached equilibrium cold temperatures, see what minimum impulse we can get out of it, because we have to trade off between the reaction control system and the service module engine and some of the lunar parts of the mission. We'll be doing using the guidance and navigation system, which, as you know, contains both a scanning telescope and a sextant, and we'll be seeing how well we can determine from Earth orbit the trajectory of the spacecraft.
I assume you'll be spending the rest of the year strictly on Apollo. What are going to be some of the first things you're going to be doing in your training?
Well, the training will go pretty much as it did in Gemini. We'll spend a great deal of time with the spacecraft, and then as our Apollo mission simulator comes into being, why, of course, we'll do the major portion of our training there.
When do you expect to have the simulator ready?
I don't know the new date, but it should be within a month, 6 weeks, I think, starting to work. First part of May.
Let me ask two questions. The first one is when, Gus, did you and White and Chaffee know of your selection yourselves? And the second question is the planning date also within the third quarter, or first quarter of '67, or is the planning date earlier?
Well, officially, we found out about it today. You can't feel comfortable about it until everybody's been told. And I don't think I understood the second part of your question.
Well, let's go back to the first question, and I'll ask you unofficially when you knew about it.
Well, I don't know when it was.
Some time ago.
Some time ago, I don't know.